Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. Rebecca's doing the crew. I'm Rebecca and today we have a Dollar Tree DIY. So let's go over the supplies for project one. We'll need a wood frame DIY project piece, some paint markers and a Sharpie. We're also going to need a pencil, some paint and paint brushes. We'll need some colored pencils and a craft writer chalk marker. We'll need the Crafter Square wall creation stickers, some rub-on transfers of your choice, a piece of paper, some paper flowers, which are optional, and some ribbon, scissors, and glue. So let's get crafty. The first thing we're going to do today is we are going to choose which transfer we'd like to use in our project. And I chose this one. It has two in the pack, but you do need to cut them apart. I chose to use the floral pattern for this project, and I am going to go ahead and tape mine down to the wood piece because I was afraid it would slide around too much considering how large of a piece it is. And of course you want to put this with the ink facing down. Then take anything you have, a popsicle stick, you can use a pencil that hasn't been sharpened, a plastic knife, whatever you have on hand, and then go ahead and go over your whole transfer and make sure all of the ink transfers to the wood. It'll change colors, which gives you a pretty good idea that it is transferred, and then go ahead and remove your piece. And I did nothing to the wood to prepare it. I used it just as is. I'm going over it with the Sharpie marker just because some of the lines were a little bit light. I wanted you mainly to be able to see them better, but you can use that to help outline if you don't have a paint marker. It's just to give you guys that tip there. So now we're going to use the colored pencils to color in all of the flowers and the leaves. I use a couple different colors of green so we can add highlights and lowlights to really help this pop up off of the background. And I wanted to point out that I'm going right over top of the black lines that are from the rub-on transfer, and they're not smearing or anything like that. They stayed pretty well down on the wood without the smudging, which I was kind of worried at first that it might smudge, but the black lines really held onto the wood, which I was super happy about. I've had some in the past that didn't want to work out as well, but these ones really work really well, so I was happy about that. I use a bunch of different colors for the flowers, which is why I'm using the colored pencils. I feel like I had a little bit more freedom in being able to blend in the colors and make them look kind of like an ombre effect. And I was able to do a lot of different color flowers doing that. If I use the chalk markers or the paint markers, it's a little bit harder to blend them with such small details. And then when I do the flower pot, I add 3 colors so I can add some highlights and lowlights to really help it give it more of like a 3D effect. And then just a quick tip, if you use a bunch of different colors, it's really nice to go over your project with a white colored pencil. It helps to blend all those colors in together and smooth the whole thing out, but still give you that 3D effect. Then I went over some of the edges with the chalk marker, and then you can blend that out with your finger if you like, or a Q-tip. To blend out the highlights, but I use a couple spots of the white chalk writer for the center of flowers to help those pop out. Some highlights on the roses, especially around the edges, really helped make them look a little bit more 3D and stand up off of the background. And then once I got most of the white filled in where I wanted the highlights, I decided that those few brown spots where you can see through the flowers are kind of pulling away from the flowers themselves. And so when I filled it in with white, it really helped them to pop up off that background. Now for this part, this is optional. I have these paper flowers. I thought they'd be really cute to add just a couple to the flowers. That way it looked like there was more of a 3D effect and some of the flowers were kind of popping up through there. It's really up to you if you want to use those or not. As you can see, I'm scrunching them up on the bottom. They're a little bit too big, and I wanted to make them smaller so they wouldn't hide the flowers that were underneath and just kind of make them a little bit, not so much a focal point, but just an addition to the flowers. I didn't want them to take away from everything that was already there. So I just add a few. I ended up stepping back and looking at it and deciding if I needed more or not. I do that quite often when I'm working with an art project. I'll take a step back further away so I can look at it really well and decide what I'm going to continue to do and if I need more or less. So once I have those flowers all done, I decided to come up with a saying to put on the side of the design here. I decided to use the phrase "live life in full bloom," And I am just using a pencil first to kind of freehand the saying and use my spacing. I did measure the paper in that open space on the wood and kind of cut it down to size before I started to make sure that it was going to fit, wouldn't be too large. But this really helps to work out the spacing and make sure that everything's going to fit, make sure everything's spelled correctly before you start, and really just line the whole thing up. So I like to do this often when I'm trying to add words to a project and I don't want to use like a Cricut or vinyl. And so once I got that figured out, all I do is I mark the top and the bottom of the paper so I know where it's going to line up once we put this onto the wood. So you just want to make a little line, it'll blend in, or you can erase it later. And then I flip the paper over and go over it with my pencil, kind of dark, because we're going to use this as a rub-on transfer and to have the pencil lead transfer onto the wood so that we can trace over top of it. That way we don't have to freehand it on the wood piece because it might not come out the same. And we worked so hard for the, lining everything up and making sure it was centered. And this really helps so that when you transfer it to the wood, you have everything where you want it and there's no mess ups. Because a lot of times using a chalk marker or a paint marker, you get just one chance. If you mess it up, you're going to have to either paint over it or start over on a new project. So that's what we're doing here. Using the paint marker, as you notice, I leave kind of spaces and go back to where the words are at the top. This is just so that I don't drag my hand across the paint, give it a few seconds to dry. That's why I did it out of order. There was no other reason other than I didn't want to drag my hand over it and smudge the paint. Then I took 2 more of those paper flowers and I used those for the letter O's for the word bloom. The flowers were kind of blending into each other, so I did a little bit of Sharpie around the edge of the flower just to help it blend in with the word bloom, since that word was in the black paint marker, and it really helped those flowers to stand out and look like the letter O. Then I freehand draw a few little like twigs with some berries on the ends, and I went over the outside edge of the words you'll see at the end here with a purplish paint color chalk marker just to give it a little bit more of like a highlight on the edges. I also took some pink paint and I did 2 coats around the outer edge and added 2 bows to where the hanger is at. And that is it. Super easy, fun way to use the rub-on transfers from Dollar Tree. So now the supplies for project 2, we'll use one of these water pitchers. We're also going to use some more of the rub-on transfers and some of the wall creation stickers. We'll use some Mod Podge and a brush and some greenery from Dollar Tree. This is pretty easy, so let's get crafty. So the first thing we want to do is we want to remove that old saying off of the front of the water pitcher. So they're just like a water slide that they have on the water pitcher. It's not actually painted on. And so all I do is scratch very lightly with an X-Acto knife to remove the paint. And then I just take a wet paper towel and rub over top to get the excess ink off. Once I have it completely off, then I pick the rub-on transfer that I want to use, figure out where I want it to be, and put that right on the water pitcher where I decide it will go. And then I use, again, something to rub over top of the transfer to transfer this to the glass. Again, I don't do anything special to the glass. I didn't clean it with alcohol or anything like that. I just kind of wiped it off with water to get that excess paint off before I added this to the glass. As you can see, it transfers really, really well. And then we're just going to decorate the glass with some of these smaller wall creation stickers. I love these floral patterns that they have out, and I just decorate the whole thing using the smaller flowers. A lot of times these large flowers are fun to use on larger projects, but you end up with a lot of these small flowers that don't really fit. So it's fun to find smaller projects that you can use these flowers in. I just keep going all the way around, adding flowers. A couple times I moved a few pieces just because I thought they were where I wanted them to be, and I changed my mind after the fact. That's okay if some of the flowers hang up over the edge. You could always trim the stickers off with an X-Acto knife at the top. Once you have it all done, seal it with Mod Podge. Once it's dry, fill it with the greenery of your choice, and you have just a fun way to cycle this little picture from the Dollar Tree. So now the supplies for our third project, which is probably the hardest project, but still not difficult to do. These are the supplies we'll need today. We'll need the wood round hanger from Dollar Tree. We're also going to need one of their wreath forms, also from Dollar Tree, and some paint and a paintbrush. We're going to need some ribbon. We're also going to use some more of the Wall Creation stickers. And then we'll need some flowers of your choice just to add to the decorations or the bows. We'll need some masking tape, some Mod Podge, and a sponge brush. We're also going to use this transfer. So I found these transfers at Lowe's this week. They were the wood stencil kits. You get 4 pieces. They're on clearance for $1.17. So make sure you check those out. Then let's get crafty. This is super, super easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our masking tape. We're going to divide this wood round in half. Just try to get it as straight as you can. I ended up doing 2 rows of the masking tape just to make sure I didn't spill paint anywhere. And then I'm going to paint the whole entire top of it with just some white paint. You can use chalk paint or just regular acrylic paint from Dollar Tree. It's really up to you. I am using chalk paint just because it's a little bit thicker and I don't have to do as many coats. I was able to get away with just the 1 coat of paint for the top portion. So while that's drying, I use the same white paint to paint the wood wreath form. And the reason I'm painting it white to start and I end up painting it gold is because the gold with that darker background really soaks in and you can't tell that it's metallic. And I wanted it to really have that metallic shine. So I'm using this white paint pretty much as like a base coat. That MDF, like kind of like particle board, which is what it's made out of, it really wants to soak the paint up. So using that chalk paint really helps to create a barrier between the wreath frame and the paint. They're the top coat that we're going to do, which is the gold. And I did do 2 coats of this gold once the white paint was dry. As you can tell, it kind of goes on pretty thin for the first coat. If I had done this right on the wreath frame, it would have just sucked it right up and you would have had to do like 10 coats. So while that's drying, we're going to remove the tape off of our wood round and do part 2. So we'll need tape again. And we're going to tie in all these colors together. So we'll just make about a 1/2 inch space between the white and the wood. And we're just going to tape all the way across and then wrap that tape around the back. And what we'll do is we'll create a gold stripe here. And this will tie in the gold that we did around the wreath frame that's going to go on top with the design in the middle. And it'll help blend in with the flowers that we're going to decorate this with. So of course we want to cover up that white paint that we just painted. Be careful, don't stick it down too hard because it is still, pretty new and you don't want to rip the paint right off of what you just painted. But make sure it's pretty dry before you paint over it, tape over it. So again, we're doing the gold paint. We're going to do 2 coats, so we'll let this dry in between coats so that we get a nice, vibrant, metallic look. And then the bottom, we're going to paint with it's kind of like a light brownish gray color. And it really matches those blue flowers that the Wall Creation sticker sells that are new this year. I haven't removed the tape yet, and that's intentional. So once that's dry on the top, I remove the tape. And then I remove the tape where the gray color is painted. I will just let the whole thing dry. Once it's dry, you can tell it kind of darkened up a little bit. And we're going to tape over where we painted the last 2 stripes. And then we're going to add 1 more color to the wood round just to tie all of the colors in the project together, which is going to be this dark navy blue. And this is just acrylic paint. It's not chalk paint. So it looks pretty thin. When I first put it on, you can see the wood grain through the paint a little bit. I believe this is the Apple Barrel brand paint from like Walmart. And so I chose to wait and let it dry just a little bit to see how much it was going to darken up before I added a second coat. And it was still a little bit light, but I liked the way that it looked. So now that the whole thing's dry, I removed all of the tape. Go ahead and take your wall creation stickers and start filling in on the bottom. It's okay if the stickers hang over the outside edge. We can trim those off after we have all of our flowers layered and put on the bottom edge. So don't do too much. You don't want to cover up all of that paint, but see how all those colors really help blend the whole thing together. Then we'll take the X-Acto knife and just trim around the outside edge, all those flowers that are hanging off. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to the next part. So that's taking one of the stencils out of that 4-pack from Lowe's. We're going to do the word hello. I just taped it down, went over it with that same blue paint. I let it dry before I removed the stencil. And then I added a few more of those smaller wall creation stickers to the outside edge. A lot of times I'll hold them up, kind of move them around to decide where I want them to be before I stick them down. And then I'm going to go ahead and seal this whole thing over top the flowers and everything with the Mod Podge. And I just do one coat, let it dry for like an hour. You can even speed up the drying time if you do a thin coat of Mod Podge. You can speed it up if you use a hair dryer, which I often do just because I'm impatient. I want to see what the whole thing looks like done. And I'm too impatient to wait for the whole thing to dry any longer than that. So I've got the whole thing done, and then that gold rim that we painted earlier, we're going to attach that with some hot glue around the outside edge. Just line it up the best you can. It's going to hang over just a tad because it's a little bit bigger than the wood round, but just a little bit. As you can see, you can still see the holes where the traditional hanger went in the wood round, which is great because we're going to add that same hanger back to. And of course, my cat's helping me. As soon as he saw that ribbon come out, we're just making some X patterns with a couple different shades of ribbon that coordinate with the project. And I always cut them a little larger, and if I need to, I'll cut the bow down a little bit smaller once I have the whole bow made. But I always like to start larger, and if I need to, make it smaller just by cutting the edges. So once you have the bow made, go ahead and fluff up the ends, kind of help get everything where it needs to be. And then those flowers I showed in the beginning, we can use one of those in the center of the bow. I decided after I added the hanger back in that I would do the bow over on the side. I just liked it better than right on top in the center. And I add the flower to the middle of the bow. If the bow's not staying exactly where you like it, go ahead and add some glue underneath of it to help hold it in place. That way it doesn't cover up the word that you painted. I add my flower, and that's it. This project is done. Of course, this one's my favorite out of all the projects we've done today. I already have it hanging on my front door for springtime. I hope you guys like learning how to do these projects with me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And here are some other videos from our channel that you might also enjoy. Have a lovely day, and I hope to see you back next time.